Maciej Krzysztofowicz. Maciej is working at the European Commission Joint Research Center. He is part of the EU Lab, European Policy Lab team, and is working mostly on foresight and anticipatory thinking.
So as we have heard in the introduction, I'm part of the EU Policy Lab, so a place inside the European Commission, directly placed in the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, where we work with civil servants across European civil servants across the Commission on innovative policies and on bringing innovation into public policies. And so what I wanted is to share actually with you 3 considerations from the experience of the EU Policy Lab, and one example that I hope will also maybe inspirational for the work of the on-farm experimentation project. And so thinking of policy, I in these 3 considerations, I have tried to look at kind of the two-way interlinkages. So on the one hand, the support of the policies that the policies can give to on-farm experimentation, and on the other hand, which is often very important for the policymakers, for the civil servants working with such projects, is actually what kind of information, what kind of knowledge can be drawn and brought into the policy from these processes. And so let me start with that, with the policymaker or a civil servant. And when we work with them and we work on innovation, they are also people, and I think I can remind that every time. And we have been using a framework that has also been developed in the Joint Research Center about the entrepreneurial employee in the public sector. And I think it's very important to remember that there are some aspects and some factors which can help civil servants to become an entrepreneurial person, a person who can bring actually novelty into public policy. So there are 3 that I will briefly discuss. The first is when you're working with a civil service, with a civil servant, give them agency. So many times they are treated, or we are treated maybe as kind of controllers, as the providers of money, and a bit less as a partner. And usually it's often the case of both sides, maybe of miscommunication, but giving a civil servant agency to actually introduce innovation, to actually bring some knowledge and introduce it into the system, is something that really enables them to help change. The second part is learning, involving them in the understanding, in the practice of the project, getting them into the network to the extent that they of course can. And the third aspect is the value for others. So the knowledge and the information they get, the processes they learn, they have to fit into the organization. And this usually through conversations, through discussions on what is not only on the policy agenda, but what is of interest to colleagues, to the management in their organization, usually leads to actually better discussions about what kind of value can be brought into the system. So that would be my first consideration. Treat the policymaker as an agent of change rather than a person apart. We also work in the EU Policy Lab on behavioral insight aspects, and I think it's worth to mention 2 things in this context. First is that implementation has become much more important for the policy, and so initiatives such as kind of the organized on-farm experimentation and building a network and a system out of this is something that actually very much goes into that direction of actually improving and building up the implementation capacity. But also the understanding of the behavioral insights and the experimentation comes with it also highlights the needs and the increases, especially at the European level, the policies need to be more flexible and more open to experimentation. And that is also something that opens up a pathway of those creating those interlinkages. And the second point that was raised in the introduction is around the scaling up. And here we see that the behavioral factors are as important as the actual innovation. And this has also been mentioned in the introduction. It's not only the machines, it's not only the IT, it's really the people. And those people, there are factors which will affect how they perceive, how they understand, and how they relate to the innovation. So again, keeping that aspect of kind of record of the actual experiment, but also of the factors, behavioral factors, the social, dispositional, emotional, and cognitive aspects, either in the form of process diaries, which is often used, or any other way, is something that brings an extra additional value that could help with the scaling up to the level where it is particularly relevant to policies. And the third issue on which we are working as well is around the anticipatory thinking and foresight. And this is something that we feel is important, especially as if the issue, as it was mentioned in the introduction, is the idea of transitioning, of not only improving particular practices, but actually moving to a whole new system of practices. And there are two aspects of on-farm experimentation which would be particularly interesting in this context. One is that foresight looks at the new and emerging trends. And on-farm experimentation can very much actually bring out what is, and the wider processes around it can bring out what is emerging from these experiments. What are the new aspects, new things that are not yet captured in the policies but should be raised? And this is increasingly of interest to policymakers. And secondly, and to counter another trend where when you have a dialogue with policymakers and they will say, well, this is very interesting, but it doesn't fit in the current policy. What we're trying to do is we're trying to get civil servants to think more, well, do not look just at the policy now, but look at how the reality and the policy could be evolving in the next 20 years through the various mega trends that you see in the corner here on the slide, through other ways. Just to provide the example, we have recently combined the people-centered approach with the foresight approach in the Farmers of the Future project, where we developed a set of 12 future farmer profiles. So we have worked with the farmers and other stakeholders to look at the current farmer profiles and how they would develop into the future, to develop these 12 farmer profiles. And for each profile, also a set of personas. The idea behind it is partly for policymakers. So when they make the policy, we would want them to actually start getting in the shoes of these future farmers. So look at the aspect of the future, but look also at the aspect of the diversity of farmers and the systems. And secondly, we've also been using those profiles and personas in in discussing with farmers their own futures, because part of wanting to change practices is to actually see the diversity and the possibilities that are out there. And in our experience, in our discussions, this has provided a good starting point to imagine what different evolutions and pathways are possible. So we have been in discussions also with various and other organizations to actually use it as an input into people's more farmers thinking about themselves, about their farms, about their potential future farms, with this as a kind of starting point. So this is where we also try to move from supporting policymakers, but also supporting farmers. So to finalize, there were the 3 points I made. First, engage policymakers as change agents. Second, try and record, apart from the results of the experiments, the behavioral factors that are also as important. And thirdly, involve foresight practices, foresight elements, thinking not only on the experimentation of the practice, but in fact, the more transitional long-term change and the opportunities that it could bring. So with that, thank you very much. Sorry for the connection problems. It's, of course, it seemed okay before, but as usual, there has to be some issue. Thank you very much.